Hi, I'm Cindy Gross with Befriending Dragons, and I work a lot with people who are really focused on their career, on the business that they're working for or that they own. And it's very clear that the Supreme Court decisions this week that promote unfairness are going to have a really negative impact on all of these businesses. They harm us as individuals and they harm the places where we work, they harm our safety at work. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that and how we do absolutely need to have these conversations at work. It's a matter of risk management, it's how we retain employees, it's how we think about the overall profitability of businesses is generally higher when you have well managed teams that are highly diverse, especially racially diverse teams. There's mountains of evidence that when your board, your leadership team, and the company as a whole are more racially diverse and also gender diverse, that your outcomes, your dollar bottom line outcomes are better. So when we think about the Supreme Court saying that we can continue to have affirmative action for legacies and for sports, for example, we know that in many ways those are based on people who look like the people who have been through there before. So somebody who's a legacy admission, it doesn't matter what their academic requirements are, but they get to get in because a parent went, because a grandparent went to a college that used to not allow people who weren't white enough to enter that institution. Uh, so the 40% of white people who get into a university because of these legacy and sports and other things unrelated to academics, that stands, that stays. But we know that there is still mountains of discrimination against Black people, against Indigenous people like myself, against people who don't look white enough, who are disabled, who are not male enough by whatever definition that might be for you, that these people continue to face discrimination. And the Supreme Court this week has said that we can't try to recognize that. We have to pretend that doesn't happen. And then we have to act accordingly. And this is throwing a lot of businesses into turmoil. Businesses rely on a steady state, they rely on regulations, protections, rules, guidelines, staying fairly stable because that's how they operate. They've built up years and years worth of patterns, practices, policies, processes, hiring based on those laws. So when these laws change or when the Supreme Court comes in as activist judges and they change the way that businesses are allowed and required to work, it costs a lot of money, it costs these businesses a lot of money. It can harm the economy. Uh, so when we think about the decision this week where it said that somebody who was theoretically considering offering websites related to weddings, and they claimed an artistic um, First Amendment right, but they're not talking about saying, well, I'm not going to say cuss words and somebody's forcing them to say cuss words or to put them on the website. They're not saying that they don't want to, I don't know, offer outdoor weddings. They only want to offer websites for indoor weddings, like things that are related to that. What they're saying is, I'm going to create a website. I'll do all this stuff and I'll do it for a person with this identity. I will not do the exact same thing for a person with a different identity. And that is just flat out bias, discrimination, white supremacy at work. And white supremacy is closely tied to patriarchy. So when you have something that's gender based, there's also always a racial element to it. And that whole culture of purity, of being enough of something, is coming into play here. So they're very tied together. When we talk about student loan relief, we're also talking about refusing service to people because of who they are. I mean, see the pattern here. Affirmative action is saying we're refusing education to people who aren't white enough. The LGBTQ website issue, refusing service because of somebody's identity. And the particular decision was based on who they fall in love with, or perhaps who they are. And when we're talking about gender identity, So we're refusing service because of who someone is. That's going to become legal now. You can be refused service for something that you claim is artistic. Sure, you have to prove it in court. But again, it's very costly to go out and litigate this to figure out, is this a creative expression? Is that a creative expression? So we're refusing service because of those things. So with student debt relief, we're also talking about, it is harder for people of all sorts of demographic areas to pay for college. So when you look at the increasingly high cost of college, I mean, when I went through in the 80s and 90s, it's a couple $1,000s a semester. Now it can be a couple $1,000s per class or per credit, even depending on where you go. So it's a very different idea. So when you think about uh, disallowing student loan relief, you're again disadvantaging entire groups of people based on who they are, not of any intrinsic value, not on their ability to do the work in the world. Voting rights. So there was a decision where ex-felons are not allowed to get back their voting rights. And again, our system is proven to disproportionately stop and question or frisk Black people and Indigenous people. In many states, Indigenous people like myself are more likely to be stopped than Black people. And so they're more likely to be involved with police to begin with. And then they're more likely to be arrested. And one of the reasons given is because, well, they've been stopped a bunch of times before. So the racism compounds. Once they've been arrested, they're more likely to face harsher penalties, sentencing, fines that are higher than white counterparts who did exactly the same thing. And they're more likely to end up staying in jail for a much longer time if they are sentenced. So when we talk about crime rates, I mean, first of all, the definition of crime is also very biased. But we're talking about something that is very much biased towards keeping white people free in society and everyone else more likely to be locked up, and given the prison industrial complex, more likely to be forced to work for a very low to nearly non-existent wage. And again, that directly harms businesses in addition to harming the people who are involved. So when we think about the risk management part, it's not only the potential losses to all these businesses just from people being removed from the economy, people not being available because they weren't able to get the education that they deserve, people not able to get the services they need. Maybe somebody can't get a resume writer because somebody doesn't want to write a resume in a small town for somebody who's gay. All of these things harm businesses. Also, if you have a business where your employees frequently travel, it becomes really hard to ask. For example, me as a woman, I'm not going to go to Florida right now. I'm not going to go to a state where I would not be able to get care if I had certain reproductive issues. Somebody who's gay is not necessarily going to want to be sent to a state where they might be questioned. Like I have a lot of women friends who are gay and have even shorter hair than mine. My hair is short, but it still looks feminine. Nobody mistakes me for a man. But I do have friends that for years have been questioned. Are you in the right restroom? Just because their presentation is not fitting some norm that stands out. So send them to a state where they could be arrested for being in the wrong restroom. And then you look at transgender people, and it becomes even harder to think about sending them to dozens of states right now. So this is all risk management. If you ask your employees to go to one of those states, now you might have to worry about, well, what happens when they're harmed? What happens when they're put in fear of their lives? Is the company responsible in some way? And if you don't send them, now you can be accused of taking somebody off of the high impact projects, of not giving them the work that they need to do in order to get a great review, in order to be promoted, and in order to do the things they need to do for their career. So these issues are very much business issues, and we should all be discussing them all of the time. And we should be fighting for something that is consistently moving forward in terms of removing the ability to say, well, you have to be white enough, you have to be male enough in order to accomplish anything in life. And that, unfortunately, is the world we still live in, that white supremacy and patriarchy are everywhere. So, just wanted you to think about that as we head into the July 4th weekend. We're celebrating what are supposed to be freedoms. These are freedoms that, many different definitions of that. I like to think that we should all individually have the freedom to choose the career we want. We should be able to choose who we marry. We should be able to choose who we enter into relationships with. Everything should be consent based, and we should have that help that we need. So thank you for listening. Have a great weekend. Cindy Gross, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a leadership coach with the company I founded, Befriending Dragons. Thank you.